The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital hummed their eternal song at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that would change everything. In the sterile hallways where hope and despair conducted their nightly dance, most people moved with
How many more
purpose.
of these?
Doctors
This
strode
is the
with
last
confident
one.
authority.
Good. I'll start
Nurses
unpacking.
hustled between rooms with practiced efficiency. Even the orderlies pushed their carts with a sense of belonging. But Margaret Callahan moved differently. Step, drag, step, drag. The sound of her left leg echoed through the trauma wing like a metronome marking time she'd lost somewhere in the desert heat of Fallujah 12 years ago. At 42, Maggie still carried herself with military bearing, her spine straight despite the limp, her shoulders squared against the weight of invisible burdens. Her brown hair, threaded with premature silver, was pulled back in a tight bun that revealed the sharp angles of her face. Her eyes, the color of winter steel, saw everything and revealed nothing. She wore navy blue scrubs that hung loose on her lean frame, and her left leg disappeared into a heavy orthopedic boot that added 3 pounds to every step. On her hip, a supply cart rattled as she guided it down the corridor, restocking crash carts with the methodical precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. From the nurse's station, voices carried in the quiet night. "Here comes the Tin Woman," someone whispered. The voice belonged to Kay Bishop, 29 years old, and head charge nurse on the night shift. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves that somehow survived 12-hour shifts, and her scrubs fit like they'd been tailored. "I swear she gets slower every week." A resident laughed low and cruel. "Maybe we should oil her joints or put her out to pasture." Maggie heard it all. She always heard it. But her hands never trembled as she checked the expiration date on an epinephrine vial. Her face never betrayed the hot shame that burned in her chest. She had learned long ago that showing pain only invited more of it. She moved to the next cart, her limp more pronounced now, as fatigue settled into the titanium rod that had replaced 6 inches of her shattered femur. The doctors had called her lucky. The reconstruction surgery was cutting edge, they said. She'd walk again, they promised. They never mentioned that walking would hurt every single day for the rest of her life. Maggie, she turned to see Dr. Brandon Hale striding toward her, his white coat billowing behind him like a cape. At 35, Hale was the youngest chief of trauma in Mercy General's history, a position he'd earned through a combination of Ivy League credentials, surgical skill, and an ego that filled every room he entered. His dark hair was artfully styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his smile practiced to inspire confidence in patients and intimidation in subordinates. "I need you to restock the supply closet in trauma too," he said without preamble, not quite meeting her eyes. "We're low on 4x4s and the 18-gauge catheters. The inventory sheet shows we restocked 3 days ago." Maggie said, her voice steady and low, roughened by years of shouting orders over helicopter rotors and gunfire. "Will someone use them?" Hale said, irritation flickering across his perfect features. "That's your job, isn't it? Keeping track of supplies since you can't exactly run codes anymore." The words landed like surgical strikes precisely placed to inflict maximum damage. Maggie's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only outward sign of the rage that burned white-hot in her chest. "Yes, doctor," she said quietly. Hale nodded, already turning away, already forgetting her. To him, she was furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. He had no idea that the woman he dismissed so casually had once held the lives of Navy SEALs in her blood-stained hands. Had no idea that her slow movements were the result of shrapnel that had torn through her leg while she dragged 6 wounded operators out of a kill zone. Had no idea that she could still save his arrogant life if she had to. Maggie pushed her cart toward the supply closet, her mind automatically cataloging what she'd need. 4x4s, gauze, tape, catheters. The mundane inventory of emergency medicine, each item a potential lifesaver in the right hands at the right moment. She was reaching for a box of gloves when the red phone at the charge desk began to ring. Not the regular phone, the red one, the direct line from emergency dispatch. Maggie's head came up, her body going still in a way that would have been familiar to anyone who'd served in combat. That preternatural stillness of a predator scenting danger on the wind. Kay Bishop answered, her bored expression transforming into pale shock within seconds. "Say again," Kay's voice pitched higher. "How many?" Dr. Hale was walking past, scrolling through something on his tablet. He stopped when he saw Kay's face. "What is it?" Kay hung up the phone with the trembling fingers. "Mass casualty event. Charter bus overturned on the interstate. Multiple critical injuries. They're estimating 30 victims." Her voice cracked. "First transport is 5 minutes out." For a single heartbeat, the ER went silent. Then chaos erupted. Hale's face transformed, the practiced charm vanishing, replaced by something harder and more focused. All right, people, listen up. His voice cut through the rising panic. We have a mass cal inbound. I want every available nurse and doctor on the floor. Clear the trauma bays. Move the non-criticals to the waiting room. Page everyone on call. Move, move, move. The ER exploded into controlled chaos. Residents ran for gurneys. Nurses cleared beds. Someone hit the overhead speaker, calling codes throughout the hospital. The night shift, usually quiet and routine, transformed into a war zone. Maggie stood by her supply cart, watching the panic bloom in the eyes of the younger staff. She saw a first-year resident hyperventilating near the sink. Saw Kay Bishop's hands shaking as she tried to organize triage stations. Saw the fear rippling through the room like a shockwave. She had seen this before, had lived this before. But that was in another life in a desert half a world away, where the wounded came in waves and you learned to function while your hands were slick with blood and your ears rang from explosions. Callahan, Hale's voice snapped across the room. Don't just stand there. We need space. Start moving non-critical patients to the waiting room. Get them out of the beds. It was grunt work, the job you gave to the person you valued least. But Maggie nodded once sharp and military crisp. On it. She began moving patients, her limp heavy, but her pace relentless. An elderly man with a broken wrist, a teenager with a sprained ankle, a woman with flu symptoms. She guided them out with calm efficiency, speaking in low, reassuring tones that somehow cut through their fear and confusion. 4 beds cleared in 3 minutes. Behind her, the automatic doors burst open. The first wave hit like a tsunami. Paramedics rushed in, shouting vitals, their faces grim. Male 50s crushing chest injury, BP 70 over 40. Female 20s open fracture head trauma, GCS of 8. Pediatric compound leg fracture, screaming for mother. The noise was deafening. Screams of pain, the electronic wail of monitors, doctors shouting orders. The clatter of gurneys and equipment, the smell of blood and gasoline and fear. Maggie was guiding a patient in a wheelchair when she saw it. A paramedic team was racing through the doors, their faces tight with desperation. On the gurney between them lay a small figure covered in blood, a child, a little girl maybe 7 years old. Her skin was the color of ash. Her eyes were rolled back. Her small chest was still. Too still. We lost her pulse, the lead paramedic screamed, his voice breaking. She's coding. We need a room now. Trauma 1 is full, Kay Bishop shouted back, her face a mask of overwhelmed panic. Trauma 2 is full. Put her in the hallway. The words cut through Maggie like a blade. Put her in the hallway. Leave her to die in a corridor while adults fought for the private rooms. Dr. Hale was deep in a chest cavity in Trauma 1, his hands inside a man's ribcage. The other attendings were similarly occupied. The residents were drowning in patients they weren't qualified to handle. There were no doctors available. The paramedics slammed the brakes on the gurney in the middle of the main corridor. One of them jumped up onto the rail, positioning himself to start compressions. Maggie looked at the abandoned wheelchair, at the little girl dying on a gurney, at the chaos swirling around them. She made a choice. She didn't limp this time. She moved. Fast. Ignoring the grinding agony in her left leg, ignoring the fire shooting up her spine, ignoring everything except the child who was slipping away. She reached the gurney in seconds. Stop compressions, Maggie said, her voice cutting through the noise with the authority of someone who'd given orders under fire. Check rhythm. The paramedic looked up, startled. Who are check the rhythm? Each word was a bullet, sharp, precise, undeniable. Something in her voice made him obey. He pulled back and Maggie's eyes went to the portable monitor. Ventricular fibrillation. The heart was quivering uselessly, unable to pump. Without intervention, the child had minutes before brain death became inevitable. Charge to 100 joules, Maggie ordered, her hands already moving to the girl's chest, positioning the pads with muscle memory that bypassed conscious thought. We need a doctor to authorize, the second paramedic started. I said charge it. Maggie's voice didn't rise in volume, but somehow doubled in intensity. It was the voice that had once commanded Marines to take cover, that had ordered Army Rangers to hold position, that had pulled authority from somewhere deep and primal. The paramedic's finger moved to the charge button. Clear. Maggie's hands came off the small chest, the shock delivered with a thump that made the girl's body arch off the gurney. Resume compressions, Maggie ordered, already reaching for the ambu bag. She tilted the girl's head back, checking the airway, and stopped. The throat was crushed. Massive swelling from a seatbelt injury had collapsed the trachea. Air couldn't get through. The compressions were pumping blood to a brain that was starving for oxygen. Airway is compromised. Maggie said, her mind racing through options with the speed of experience. I can't intubate. The anatomy's destroyed. She needs a surgical airway. Where's the doctor? The paramedic yelled, looking around desperately. Maggie looked toward Trauma 1. Hale was elbow deep in another patient barking orders, his full attention on the man who was bleeding out on his table. He wasn't coming. Nobody was coming. The girl had maybe 2 minutes before the lack of oxygen caused irreversible brain damage. Maggie's hand went to the trauma bag on the side of the gurney. Her fingers found the familiar shape of a scalpel kit still sealed in sterile packaging. No, the voice was sharp and female. Kay Bishop had appeared at Maggie's elbow, her eyes wide with shock and something that looked like fear. Absolutely not, Kay said, her voice rising. You are not performing a cricothyrotomy. You're a supply clerk. This is illegal. You will go to jail. I will not be party to this. Maggie didn't look at her. Her eyes were on the girl's face, watching the color deepen from gray to blue. The monitor showed the heart rhythm degrading, the chaotic fibrillation becoming less organized. She was dying. She has 90 seconds before brain death, Maggie said, her voice flat and cold. Give me the scalpel. No, Kay backed away, her hands up like Maggie was pointing a weapon. I won't help you commit malpractice. I won't. Maggie's hand shot out and grabbed the trauma bag. She ripped open the sterile kit with her teeth, her other hand already palpating the girl's small neck, feeling for the landmarks she'd used 100 times before in conditions far worse than this. Hold her head, Maggie told the paramedic. He hesitated for only a second, then his hands moved to cradle the girl's head, keeping it stable. Maggie's fingers found the cricothyroid membrane, that small space between the thyroid and cricoid cartilage. On a child, it was tiny. On a child with a crushed throat, it was nearly impossible to find by sight alone. But Maggie wasn't looking. Her fingers were her eyes, reading the anatomy through touch, through years of practice on training dummies, and real patients in real emergencies where the lights were out and the bombs were falling. She made the incision. Blood welled up, immediately obscuring the field. But Maggie's fingers were already in the wound, spreading the tissue, finding the opening she'd created. She slid the small tracheostomy tube into place with movements so practiced they looked effortless. Bag her, Maggie said. The paramedic squeezed the ambu bag connected to the new tube. The girl's chest rose, fell, rose again. We have a pulse, the second paramedic shouted, his voice cracking with relief and disbelief. Sinus rhythm, returning, oxygen saturation, climbing. Maggie's hands moved on autopilot, taping the tube securely in place, checking for proper placement, ensuring the airway was stable. Her movements were precise and economical, wasting no motion, no time. She had just saved a life in the middle of a hospital corridor, without permission, without oversight, without hesitation. A hand grabbed her shoulder and spun her around with enough force that she nearly lost her balance. Dr. Brandon Hale stood there, still wearing his blood-spattered surgical gown, his face twisted with fury, and something that might have been fear. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was low and dangerous, pitched just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. Did you just perform surgery on a patient without authorization? Maggie looked at him with those winter steel eyes, her expression calm, despite the blood on her hands and the adrenaline screaming through her system. She was coding, Maggie said, her voice steady. Her airway was crushed. She would have died. I don't care. Hale's voice rose now, loud enough that the chaos in the ER momentarily paused. Heads turned. People stared. You are a supply clerk. You are not a surgeon. You are not even a practicing nurse. You just committed malpractice in my ER. The paramedic who'd helped tried to interject. Sir, she saved the girls. Get out. Hale pointed toward the exit doors, his fingers shaking with rage. Get out of my emergency room. You're suspended pending investigation. Go home, Callahan. Before I have security throw you out. Maggie looked at him, then at the little girl whose chest was now rising and falling with a rhythmic regularity. The monitors showed a strong, steady heartbeat. Good oxygen saturation. The child was alive. She looked at Kay Bishop, who stood in the corner with a smirk playing at the edges of her mouth, enjoying the spectacle of Maggie's downfall. She looked at the crowd of doctors and nurses and residents who had stopped to watch, their faces a mix of shock and judgment and something that might have been awe. Maggie untied her surgical gown, the disposable kind they use for messy procedures. She threw it in the biohazard bin. Her movements were deliberate, controlled, showing none of the emotion that roiled beneath her surface. She straightened her back military straight despite the pain in her leg. She turned, and she walked toward the exit. Step, drag, step, drag. The sound of her boots on the polished floor echoed in the sudden silence of the stunned emergency room. She didn't look back, didn't defend herself, didn't beg. She simply walked out carrying her dignity like armor, leaving behind a little girl who would wake up tomorrow because a broken woman had refused to let her die. The automatic doors closed behind her with a pneumatic hiss. In the security office, 3 floors above the chaos, a guard named Dennis Kowalski was reviewing the night's camera feeds, doing his routine check for any incidents that needed to be logged. He was 63, a retired cop who'd spent 30 years on the force before his knees gave out and they put him on desk duty. He liked the quiet nights at the hospital. Nothing much happened. Drunks occasionally tried to leave before treatment. Family members sometimes got emotional. But mostly it was watching empty hallways and logging timestamps. Tonight was different. He watched the cameras in the ER, saw the mass casualty event unfold, saw the controlled chaos of the trauma response. And then he saw something that made him sit up straight in his chair. He saw Maggie Callahan perform that emergency procedure on the little girl. He'd seen combat, had pulled tours in the Gulf War back when he was young. He recognized what he was watching. That wasn't panic. That wasn't luck. That was battlefield medicine performed by someone who'd done it so many times that their hands moved faster than thought. Dennis reached for the secure line, the one that connected to certain federal agencies for certain situations. But before he could pick up the phone, his computer screen flickered. A window opened unbidden. Red text appeared, facial recognition match. Priority Alpha. A photo of Maggie appeared, younger, in Navy dress uniform. Below it, redacted blocks of text classification markers and a warning. Classified. Special Operations Personnel. Do not contact without authorization. Dennis stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he picked up the secure phone and dialed a number he'd been given 15 years ago when he'd gotten his security clearance for this job. A number he'd never had occasion to use. Until now. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. Federal Operations Center verification required. This is Dennis Kowalski, Security Supervisor, Mercy General Hospital, Arlington. He read off his badge number and clearance code. I have a flag on the facial recognition system. Priority Alpha. Subject is Margaret Callahan, currently on premises. A pause. Keyboard clicks in the background. Stand by. More clicking. Then the voice came back harder, now more alert. Status of subject. She just performed emergency surgery on a pediatric patient. Saved the kid's life and then got fired for it. Another pause, longer this time. Do not approach. Do not engage. Monitor only. This line will remain open. Federal response is being activated. Dennis looked at his screens, watched Maggie push through the exit doors into the night, watched her climb into an old pickup truck in the far corner of the parking lot, watched her sit there for a moment, her head bowed before she started the engine. Understood, he said into the phone. Monitoring only. Maggie's apartment was 12 miles from the hospital in a part of town where the rent was cheap and the neighbors minded their own business. The building was old but well-maintained, 4 stories of red brick with iron fire escapes that creaked in the wind. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Her limp more pronounced now, her legs screaming with every step. By the time she reached her door, she was breathing hard, sweat beading on her forehead. Inside the apartment was small and spare. A single bedroom, a kitchen barely large enough for one person, a living room with a worn couch and a coffee table covered in medical journals and nursing textbooks. The walls were bare except for a few photographs in simple frames. Maggie dropped her keys on the table and limped to the couch. She sat down heavily, her leg extended straight in front of her. With careful practiced movements, she unbuckled the straps of her orthopedic boot and eased it off. Underneath her leg was a roadmap of scars. Purple and jagged, they twisted around the metal rod that showed faintly beneath the skin. Some days the scars were numb, other days they burned with phantom pain that no medication could touch. Tonight they burned. Maggie closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to center herself, trying to find the calm that meditation was supposed to bring. Instead, she heard helicopters. The sound was so real, so immediate, that her eyes snapped open. But the apartment was silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the neighbor's television bleeding through the wall. It was always like this after the adrenaline, after the crisis, after the moment when her training took over and she became the person she used to be. The flashbacks came unwelcome and vivid, dragging her back to the desert. She could smell it. The burning diesel. The copper tang of blood. The acrid bite of explosive residue. She could feel the heat, the kind of heat that turned metal too hot to touch and made the air shimmer like water. She could hear the screaming. Medic! We need a medic! Maggie's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms hard enough to hurt. The pain anchored her, brought her back to the present. She opened her eyes and looked at the photographs on the wall. The first was her wedding photo. She was 26, fresh-faced and smiling, wearing a simple white dress. Beside her stood David Callahan, tall and handsome in his navy dress uniform, his arm around her waist, his eyes full of love and pride. They'd had 10 good years before the cancer took him. 10 years of laughter and arguments and quiet mornings and shared dreams. 5 years gone now, and sometimes the grief still hit her like a physical blow. The second photo showed Maggie in combat fatigues, dirt-stained and exhausted, her arm draped around a massive bearded man in tactical gear. They were both grinning, despite the dust and blood caked on their faces. Behind them, 4 more operators, all SEAL team members, all alive in that moment. 3 of them were dead now. The third photo was her daughter, Samantha, 20 years old Army lieutenant currently deployed somewhere in the Middle East that she couldn't talk about over unsecured lines. She had David's eyes and Maggie's stubborn chin. The photo showed her in full battle rattle holding a rifle, looking impossibly young and impossibly brave. Maggie kept her phone next to that photo, hoping for texts that came sporadically when Sam had access to satellite communication. The last message had been 3 days ago. "All good here, Mom. Don't worry. Love you." Maggie had read it 50 times, analyzing every word for subtext, for hidden messages, for any sign that her daughter was in danger. She stood testing her weight on her damaged leg and limped to the small bookshelf in the corner. On the bottom shelf, hidden behind a row of paperback thrillers she'd never gotten around to reading, sat a wooden box. The wood was dark with age, the brass hinges tarnished. She hadn't opened it in 10 years. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside, resting on faded blue velvet, were her medals. The Navy Cross second, only to the Medal of Honor, its bronze cross and blue ribbons still bright despite the years. The Purple Heart, the Combat Action Ribbon. The Iraq Campaign Medal with 3 stars. Below them a photograph, 7 people in desert camouflage standing in front of a Humvee. Young, dirty, exhausted, alive. On the back, in faded ink, Fallujah Angels, 2014. The Last Guard. Maggie traced the faces with one finger. Marcus Blackwood, the Marine who never smiled, but always had your back. William Sterling, the Ranger who could shoot the wings off a fly at 500 yards. Thomas Donnelly, the SEAL who'd taken a round through the spine and kept fighting from his wheelchair. Raymond Cavanaugh, the medic who taught her half of what she knew. Franklin McKenzie, the Air Force P, who could fly anything with rotors. And in the center, taller than the rest, Captain James Riker. The man she'd saved. The man who'd saved her. The man who'd held her hand while the surgeons rebuilt her leg and told her she'd walk again even when she didn't believe it. Maggie closed the box gently and slid it back into its hiding place. She made herself a cup of tea she wouldn't drink and sat on the couch as the night deepened around her. She should try to sleep. Should try to rest. Tomorrow she'd have to call her landlord, explain why rent might be late, start looking for a new job, figure out how to survive without the salary that barely covered her expenses. But sleep felt impossible. Her mind kept replaying the night, the little girl's blue lips, the weight of the scalpel, the sound of air rushing into starved lungs. Dr. Hale's face twisted with rage and fear. She had done the right thing. She knew she had done the right thing. So why did it feel like punishment? Her phone buzzed, startling her out of her thoughts. Unknown number. Maggie stared at it for a long moment. Debt collectors, probably. Or the hospital's legal department calling to threaten her with criminal charges. She should let it go to voicemail. But something made her answer. "Callahan Bussing," she said, her voice rough. There was a pause. Then a voice she hadn't heard in 2 years but would recognize anywhere. Angel. Only one person had ever called her that. Only one person had earned the right. "Riker," she breathed. "I heard what you did tonight." Captain James Riker said, his voice carrying that Texas drawl that decades in the Navy hadn't quite erased. "Heard you saved a little girl named Emily Fitzgerald." "How did you?" "Emily is my goddaughter," Riker said. "Her father is Jonathan Fitzgerald, lieutenant. Good man, served with me in Fallujah. He's the one who called me." Maggie's grip tightened on the phone. "She's okay, the girl. She's alive because of you, breathing on her own. Doctors say the cricothyrotomy was textbook perfect. Under the circumstances, probably the only thing that could have saved her." Maggie closed her eyes, feeling something loosen in her chest. The girl was alive. That was all that mattered. "But that's not why I'm calling," Riker continued, his voice dropping lower, taking on an edge that Maggie recognized. It was his mission voice, the one he used when things were about to get complicated. "Someone tried to kill Emily. Tonight. In her hospital room." Maggie's eyes snapped open. "What?" 30 minutes ago, male late 20s dressed as a nurse, tried to inject something into her IV line. The security guard on the floor noticed and challenged him. He ran. We found the syringe, succinylcholine. Maggie's blood went cold. Succinylcholine was a paralytic. In the right dose, it caused respiratory arrest that looked natural, untraceable unless you knew to look for it. The kind of thing a professional would use. Why would someone... Because Emily isn't just a little girl, Riker said. She's the daughter of a man who's about to testify before Congress about $3 billion in fraudulent defense contracts. Jonathan Fitzgerald is a defense engineer. He found the evidence. He was supposed to testify next week. The bus crash wasn't an accident, Maggie. The brakes were cut. Someone tried to kill Jonathan. When that didn't work, they went after his daughter. Maggie stood, her tactical mind already working through the implications. Where is she now? Being moved to a secure location, federal protection. But she's traumatized, scared, won't talk to the marshals, won't talk to the psychologists. Riker paused. She keeps asking for the lady who saved her, the angel with the kind eyes. Riker, I need you, Maggie. Emily needs you. And honestly, if someone's willing to kill a 7-year-old to keep their secrets buried, this is bigger than we know. I need someone I trust. Someone who knows how to protect people when everything goes to hell. I'm not active duty anymore, Maggie said quietly. I haven't been for 10 years. You think I don't know that? Riker's voice softened. I know what you've been doing, Maggie. I know they had you stocking shelves. I know they treated you like you were invisible. But tonight you proved something. You proved you're still the best combat nurse I've ever seen. You proved you still have it. I'm not who I used to be. None of us are. But we're who we need to be when it matters. Maggie looked down at her scarred leg, at the medals hidden in the box, at the photograph of her daughter who was out there somewhere fighting her own wars. When, she asked? Now, there's a car outside your building, black SUV. I'm in it. We'll bring you to Emily. You can decide after you see her. Maggie walked to her window and looked down. 3 stories below, parked in the shadow of the building, a black SUV sat with its engine running. She could just make out 2 figures in the front seats. She should say no, should protect what little stability she had left, should stay in her small apartment and her small life and let other people fight these battles. But a 7-year-old girl was scared and alone and being hunted by people who had already tried to kill her twice. And Maggie had never been very good at saying no when someone needed help. She looked at the shelf where the wooden box sat hidden. Once a guardian, always a guardian. Give me 5 minutes, she said. She hung up and moved with purpose, now the limp forgotten in the familiar rhythm of preparing for a mission. She changed into dark clothes, practical and durable. She pulled her hair back tighter. She laced up boots that could handle rough terrain. And from the back of her closet, hidden behind winter coats she rarely needed, she pulled out a go bag she'd packed 10 years ago and never quite been able to throw away. Inside, a first aid kit that went far beyond basic. Trauma supplies, quick clot bandages, a tourniquet, hemostatic gauze. The tools of her trade kept sharp and ready, even when she'd convinced herself she'd never need them again. Also inside, her old M9 pistol, cleaned and oiled and maintained with the same care she'd given it in the service. She checked the magazine, chambered around, and secured it in a holster at her hip. She looked around the apartment one last time, at the quiet life she'd built from the ashes of her old one, at the safety and anonymity she'd cultivated. Then she picked up her keys, grabbed her bag, and walked out the door. In the SUV, Captain James Riker watched the building's entrance. He was 60 now, his dark hair gone silver, his face carved with lines that spoke of hard years and harder choices. But his eyes were still sharp, still alert, still carrying the weight of command. Movement, the driver said, a young operator named Walsh, who Riker had personally selected for this assignment. Maggie emerged from the building, moving with that distinctive gait, her bag slung over one shoulder. Even in the dim streetlight, Riker could see the changes a decade had wrought. The silver in her hair, the lines around her eyes, the way she favored her left leg. But he could also see what hadn't changed. The straight spine, the alert scan of her surroundings, the controlled, economical movements of someone who never wasted energy. She crossed to the SUV and opened the back door. Their eyes met. Neither of them smiled. There was too much history for easy smiles. Too many scars, too many losses, too many brothers and sisters who hadn't made it home. Hey, Riker, she said quietly. Hey, Angel, he replied. She climbed in and Walsh pulled away from the curb, heading toward a future none of them could predict. Behind them in the security office of Mercy General Hospital, Dennis Kowalski spoke into the secure phone line that had remained open for the past hour. Subject is mobile. entering vehicle with military personnel, heading northwest on Jefferson Avenue. The voice on the other end was different now, higher ranking, more authority. Copy that, maintain surveillance, we have assets in motion. Dennis watched his screens as the SUV's taillights disappeared into the night. He'd been a cop long enough to recognize when something big was happening, when the gears of federal machinery started turning, when ordinary people got caught up in things they couldn't control. He hoped Margaret Callahan knew what she was getting into. He had a feeling she was about to find out. The SUV cut through the darkness of Arlington's industrial district, where warehouses loomed like sleeping giants and street lights fought a losing battle against the shadows. Maggie sat in the back seat, her medical bag at her feet, watching the city blur past the tinted windows. Captain James Riker occupied the seat beside her, his presence filling the space with the quiet authority of a man who'd spent 40 years commanding the military's most elite warriors. He'd aged since she'd last seen him, the silver in his hair now complete his face bearing deeper lines. But his eyes remained the same, sharp and assessing, missing nothing. "How bad is the leg?" Riker asked without preamble. He'd never been one for small talk. "Bad enough," Maggie said. "Good enough." A ghost of a smile touched his weathered face. "Still giving me non-answers, I see. Still asking questions you already know the answers to." The driver Walsh glanced in the rearview mirror but said nothing. He was young, maybe 30, with the clean-cut look and alert posture of an active operator. Maggie could read the questions in his eyes. Who was this middle-aged woman with a limp? Why was the captain treating her like she mattered? He'd learn. Or he wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't her problem. "Tell me about the Fitzgerald family," Maggie said, switching into mission mode. Her voice dropped half an octave, became more clipped. "Everything." Riker pulled a tablet from the seat pocket in front of him. Jonathan Fitzgerald, Lieutenant Navy Reserve, 38 years old. Mechanical engineer with titanium defense systems for 12 years. Wife died 3 years ago, cancer. Raising Emily alone. He swiped through photos. A lean man with tired eyes and a daughter's smile. 6 months ago, he discovered discrepancies in the invoicing for the new destroyer program. Started digging. Found a pattern of fraudulent billing going back 15 years. $3 billion in overcharges, kickbacks, and phantom contracts. "Let me guess," Maggie said. He reported it through official channels. Like a good sailor, filed reports with his supervisors. When nothing happened, he went to the Inspector General, then to congressional oversight. Riker's voice hardened, and then people started dying. He swiped again, photos of accident scenes. A car wrapped around a tree, a house fire, a drowning. 4 other engineers who worked on the same contracts, all dead within 3 months, all ruled accidental. But they weren't. No, they weren't. Fitzgerald realized he was next. Went to the FBI with everything he had. They put him in protective custody, scheduled testimony for next week. Riker paused. Then the bus crash happened. Maggie studied the photos of the crash scene on the tablet. The charter bus on its side, emergency vehicles everywhere, the kind of chaos that could hide almost anything. How many people were on that bus? 32, Fitzgerald and Emily, plus 30 others. Church group heading to a retreat. Riker's jaw tightened. 12 dead, 15 critical. The brakes were cut precisely. Whoever did it knew exactly which line to sever to make it look like mechanical failure. Professional. Very. And expensive. The kind of expensive that suggests serious money behind it. The SUV turned down a narrow street between 2 abandoned warehouses. No lights, no traffic. The kind of place where screams would go unheard. "Where are we going?" Maggie asked, her hand instinctively moving toward the weapon at her hip. "Old Via Hospital. Closed 5 years ago when they built the new facility. Still owned by the government. Still has power and water. And most importantly, still has medical equipment." Oh, Riker glanced at her. "And it's off every official grid. No cameras, no digital footprint. Cash payments to a security company that asks no questions." "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the moment I heard Emily was targeted. I don't trust official protection anymore. Not when billion-dollar defense contracts are at stake. Someone inside is feeding information. Someone high up enough to know where witnesses are kept." The SUV pulled into an underground garage, the headlights revealing a space that had once been white, but was now gray with dust and neglect. Walsh killed the engine. In the sudden silence, Maggie could hear the distant drip of water and the whisper of wind through broken windows somewhere above. Riker opened his door. "She's on the 3rd floor, east wing. We've got 2 men outside the room, 2 more on the perimeter. But she won't settle. Keeps asking for the angel who saved her." Maggie followed him out of the vehicle, her boots echoing on the concrete. The limp was worse now after sitting. Her leg had stiffened, the metal rod conducting cold deep into her bone. She pushed through the pain, falling into step behind Riker as he led her to a stairwell that smelled of mildew and old concrete. 3 flights up, each step a small agony, but Maggie's breathing stayed even controlled. Pain was just information. You could acknowledge it without letting it control you. The third-floor hallway was dimly lit by emergency lights someone had rigged to a generator. The walls were institutional green, the kind of color that was supposed to be soothing, but just reminded everyone they were in a place where people suffered. Most of the room doors stood open, revealing empty spaces where beds had once been. Ghosts of medicine past. 2 men stood outside a door at the end of the hall. They had the look, the stance, the way their eyes tracked movement and their hands stayed near their weapons. Operators, both of them even in civilian clothes. They nodded to Riker, but their eyes lingered on Maggie with undisguised curiosity. "Lieutenant Commander Callahan," Riker said formally. "This is Edwards and Morrison. They're good men." Maggie nodded acknowledgement. She caught the way their postures shifted when Riker used her rank, the way respect replaced curiosity. "The girl?" Maggie asked. "Awake, scared. The father's with her, but he's barely holding it together himself." Edwards was the older of the two, maybe 45, with gray in his beard and scars on his knuckles. "Kid's been through hell twice in 12 hours. Maggie moved toward the door, then stopped. "What have you told her about me?" "Nothing," Riker said. "Just that you were coming. She recognized your description. Asked if you were the angel." "I'm not an angel. Try telling her that." Maggie pushed open the door. The room beyond was larger than she'd expected, clearly a former intensive care unit. Most of the equipment had been removed, but someone had brought in a hospital bed, monitors, IV stands. Everything a critical patient might need. In the bed, looking impossibly small, lay Emily Fitzgerald. The girl was awake, her wide eyes tracking Maggie's entrance. The tracheostomy tube was still in place, carefully bandaged. Her father sat in a chair pulled close to the bed, holding her small hand. He looked up as Maggie entered, and his face crumpled with relief so profound it was painful to witness. "You're hurt, Jonathan," Fitzgerald said, his voice breaking. "You're the one who saved Emily." "I'm Margaret Callahan," Maggie said quietly. She moved closer, her movements deliberately slow and non-threatening. Children were like wounded animals. Sudden movement scared them. Emily's eyes followed her, huge and dark in her pale face. The girl tried to speak, but the tube prevented it. Frustration flickered across her features. "Hey there," Maggie said, pulling a chair close to the opposite side of the bed. "Don't try to talk yet. That tube is helping you breathe, but it makes talking hard. Can you nod if you understand me?" Emily nodded. "Good girl. My name is Maggie. I was there last night when you came into the hospital. Do you remember to..." Another nod, smaller this time, fear in her eyes. "You were very brave," Maggie continued, her voice taking on the soothing quality she'd used with hundreds of wounded soldiers. "Braver than most adults I know, and you're going to be okay. I promise you that." Emily's hand moved, gesturing. Maggie followed the movement to a small whiteboard someone had left on the bedside table. She picked it up along with the marker and handed them to the girl. With shaking hands, Emily wrote in careful child's handwriting, "Are the bad men gone?" Maggie looked at Riker, who stood in the doorway. He gave her a slight shake of his head. "No, the bad men were not gone. They were still out there, still hunting." But Maggie looked back at Emily and made it a choice. She would not lie to this child, but she would not terrify her either. "The bad men can't get to you here," Maggie said. "Captain Riker and his friends are keeping you safe. And I'm going to stay here with you to make sure nothing happens." "Okay." Emily stared at her for a long moment, those dark eyes searching Maggie's face for any sign of deception. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. She nodded and wrote, "You're the angel." "I'm not an angel, sweetie. I'm just a nurse who knows how to help people." "But you have angel eyes," Emily wrote. "My mom told me angels have kind eyes and they come when you need them most." Maggie felt something tighten in her chest. She glanced at Jonathan, who was wiping tears from his face. "My wife," he said softly. "Before she died, she used to tell Emily stories about guardian angels who protected children." His voice broke. "I never thought we'd need one for real." Maggie stood, moving around the bed to check Emily's vital signs with practiced efficiency. Heart rate elevated but steady. Oxygen saturation good. The tracheostomy site was clean, no signs of infection. "She needs rest," Maggie said to Jonathan. "And so do you. When's the last time you slept?" "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see the bus flipping, see Emily flying through the air." He was shaking now, the adrenaline crash hitting him hard. They tried to kill us. They tried to kill my little girl. I know, and they failed, because you're both stronger than they thought. Maggie put a hand on his shoulder. But you can't protect her if you collapse from exhaustion. There's a cot in the corner. Lie down. I'll watch over her. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. And I don't offer things I don't mean. Jonathan looked at his daughter, who nodded encouragement. Finally, he stood on unsteady legs and made his way to the cot someone had set up in the corner. He was asleep within minutes, his body simply shutting down from accumulated stress and fear. Maggie settled into the chair beside Emily's bed. She checked her watch. 02:30 hours, the dead of night when the body's defenses were lowest and fear ran highest. Emily wrote on her board, "Are you really going to stay?" "All night," Maggie confirmed, "and tomorrow night if you need me, for as long as it takes." Why it was a fair question. Why would a stranger, a woman who'd just lost her job, commit to protecting a child she barely knew? "Because a long time ago I made a promise," Maggie said quietly. "I promised to protect people who couldn't protect themselves, to stand between innocent people and the things that wanted to hurt them. I may not wear the uniform anymore, but promises don't expire." Emily considered this, then wrote, "Were you a soldier?" "I was a Navy nurse. I took care of wounded soldiers and sailors. Kept them alive when they were hurt." "Did you save lots of people?" "Some, not as many as I wanted to." The girl's next question hit harder than Maggie expected. "Did people die?" "Yes," Maggie said, meeting Emily's eyes. She would not lie. "Sometimes people died. Sometimes I couldn't save them. And that's the hardest part of what I did. But I saved more than I lost. And every person I saved mattered." Emily nodded, slowly processing this. Then she wrote, "I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart. Being scared is okay. It's smart. It means you understand that dangerous things are real. But being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. Brave means being scared and keeping going anyway." "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." Emily hesitated, the marker hovering over the board. Then she wrote, "Do you have kids?" The question pierced something in Maggie's chest. "I have a daughter. Her name is Samantha. She's 20 years old. She's a soldier too, like I was." "Is she brave?" "Braver than me. Does she know you're an angel?" Maggie smiled, a real smile that felt strange on her face after such a long day. "She thinks I'm just her mom. Kind of embarrassing, kind of overprotective, kind of annoying." Emily's shoulders shook with silent laughter. She wrote, "My mom was like that too. I miss her." "I bet she misses you too. And I bet she's proud of how brave you're being." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them away angrily, a child trying to be strong. Then she set down the marker and board and held out her small hand. Maggie took it, careful of the IV line, and held it gently. The girl's eyes began to close. The sedation and pain medication were pulling her under. But she fought it, struggling to stay awake, fear flickering across her face. "It's okay to sleep," Maggie said softly. "I'll be right here. If anything happens, I'll wake you. I promise." Emily's grip tightened for a moment. Then slowly her eyes closed. Her breathing deepened. Within minutes she was asleep, her small hand still wrapped around Maggie's. Maggie sat there in the dim light, holding a child's hand, and felt the weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders like an old familiar coat. This was what she did. This was who she was underneath all the pain and loss and years of being invisible. She was a guardian. The door opened quietly. Riker slipped in, moving with the silence of a man who'd spent a lifetime practicing stealth. He looked at Maggie holding Emily's hand, and something softened in his granite features. "She trusts you," he said quietly. "She's 7 and terrified. She'd trust anyone who showed her kindness." "No, she wouldn't. Kids know. They can smell lies and fear and hidden agendas. She trusts you because you're trustworthy." Riker moved to stand beside her. "Just like my men trusted you. Just like I trusted you." Maggie carefully extracted her hand from Emily's, making sure not to wake her. She stood, her leg protesting, and followed Riker to the far corner of the room where they could talk without disturbing the sleeping patients. "Tell me the rest," Maggie said. "You didn't bring me here just to babysit. What's really happening?" Riker's expression darkened. "The attack at Mercy General wasn't random. The man who tried to inject Emily, we ID'd him. Former Navy SEAL, medically retired 5 years ago, now working for Thornton Security Incorporated." The name hit Maggie like a physical blow. Thornton, as in General Richard Thornton? The same, General Richard Thornton. Maggie knew that name. Knew it in her bones and her scars and her nightmares. The man who'd been their colonel in Fallujah. The man who'd ordered them into an operation that intelligence said was compromised. The man who'd refused to send backup when they were pinned down and dying. The man who'd made a decision that cost 3 operators their lives and left Maggie with a shattered leg and survivor's guilt that still woke her in the night. Thornton is CEO of one of the biggest private military contractors in the country, Riker continued. His company holds billions in government contracts, and according to the evidence, Fitzgerald found a significant portion of those contracts involve fraudulent billing. How significant? 3 billion over 15 years. Thornton's been running a long-term scam, overcharging for equipment that was never delivered, billing for services never performed, kickbacks to procurement officers. It's systematic, sophisticated, and it goes all the way to congressional oversight committees. Maggie's mind raced, putting pieces together. Fitzgerald discovered it, reported it, and now Thornton is cleaning up loose ends. Exactly. 4 engineers dead, Fitzgerald marked for death. And when the bus crash failed to kill him, they went after his daughter to terrorize him into silence. Except Emily survived too, because I happened to be there. Nothing about you being there was random, Riker said. That's what I realized tonight. You were assigned to the night shift. You were in the ER during the mass casualty event. You saved Emily. I don't believe in fate. Neither do I, but I believe in preparation, meeting opportunity, and you were prepared. Riker moved to the window, looking out at the darkness beyond. Thornton doesn't know you're involved yet. He thinks Emily is in federal custody, protected by marshals he can't reach. He doesn't know we moved her here. And he definitely doesn't know that the woman who saved her is the same nurse he left to die in Fallujah 12 years ago. The pieces clicked into place. This is personal for you. Damn right it's personal. Thornton sacrificed our people to protect his criminal enterprise. He let good men and women die because sending backup would have raised questions about why we were there in the first place. He's been untouchable for over a decade, getting richer while we bury our friends. And now you see a chance to bring him down. Now I see a chance for justice. But I need your help, Maggie. Emily won't testify without you there. She's traumatized, terrified. Her father can barely function. The federal prosecutors need Emily's testimony to corroborate the timeline. Need her to confirm her father was on that bus, that the crash happened like he said. She's 7 years old. You can't put her through that. I know, which is why I need you to make her strong enough to do it. Need you to help her heal physically and mentally. Need you to be what you've always been, a guardian who stands between innocent people and the darkness. Maggie looked back at the bed where Emily slept, her small face peaceful for the first time since Maggie had met her. Then at the cot where Jonathan slept, the sleep of the utterly exhausted. 2 people whose lives had been shattered by greed and corruption and violence. How long do we have? Maggie asked. Congressional testimony is scheduled for 1 week from now. The prosecutors are willing to delay, but not indefinitely. Too many people have skin in this game. Every day we wait, the pressure builds for Fitzgerald to either testify or disappear into witness protection forever. And if Emily can't testify, if she's not ready, then the case is weaker. Maybe not enough to convict. Thornton's lawyers will tear apart Fitzgerald's credibility, claim he's a disgruntled employee. Without corroboration, without Emily confirming the crash was attempted murder, the defense contracts fraud becomes he said, she said. You're asking me to push a traumatized child to do something terrifying. I'm asking you to give her the strength to face her fear, to help her be brave enough to tell the truth. Because that little girl's the key to taking down a man who's been killing with impunity for over a decade. Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Through the window, she could see the city lights in the distance, a constellation of humanity going about their lives, unaware of the battles being fought in the shadows. I need to talk to the last guard, she finally said. Riker smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Marcus, William, Thomas, Raymond, and Franklin. All still in the area. All still carrying the scars from Fallujah. All very interested in settling accounts with General Thornton. This isn't about revenge. No, it's about justice and protection and making sure that what happened to us doesn't happen to anyone else. Before Maggie could respond, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, frowning at the unknown number. The text message was short. We know where you are. We're coming. Leave the girl or die with her. Maggie showed the screen to Riker. His face went hard as granite. How did they? Doesn't matter, they found us. He moved to the door, keying his radio. All units, we have a security breach. Go to alert status. Weapons free. Outside, Maggie heard the sound of operators moving into position, the quiet clicks of weapons being readied, the controlled urgency of professional soldiers preparing for combat. Maggie moved to her medical bag and pulled out her M9. She checked the magazine chambered around. The familiar weight felt right in her hand. Get them out of here, Maggie said, gesturing to Emily and Jonathan. I'll buy you time. The hell you will. We defend this position together. Riker, I haven't been in a firefight in 12 years. I'm a liability. You're a Navy Cross recipient who saved 6 men while taking fire. You're exactly who I want at my back. He handed her a tactical vest. Besides, they're not here yet. We have time to set up a proper defense. Time to turn this hospital into a killing ground. Or time to evacuate to a secondary position. No, we run now, they follow. We fight now, we end this. Riker's eyes glinted with something dangerous. Besides, I've been waiting 12 years for a chance to make Thornton pay. I'm not running. A commotion at the door. Edwards burst in, his face grim. Sir, we've got a situation. 3 SUVs just pulled into the underground garage. 10, maybe 12 hostiles. Military-grade weapons. Moving with tactical precision. Time to contact. 5 minutes, maybe less. Riker turned to Maggie. Your call. We can try to slip out the back, make a run for it. Or we can make a stand. But I'm telling you now, if we run, they'll chase us. And next time we might not see them coming. Maggie looked at Emily, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger approaching. Looked at her father, who'd already lost so much. Looked at the operators moving into defensive positions, men who'd signed up to protect people like this. She thought about the promise she'd made all those years ago, about standing between innocent people and harm, about being a guardian even when it was terrifying, even when the odds were impossible. We make a stand, Maggie said quietly, but we do it smart, defensive positions, force them to come to us, turn their advantages into disadvantages. A slow smile spread across Riker's face. There's the angel I remember. Morrison, wake Lieutenant Fitzgerald. Get him and Emily to the interior room, no windows. Edwards, I want eyes on every approach. Walsh, bring up the extra weapons from the vehicle. The operators moved with practiced efficiency. Maggie pulled on the tactical vest, feeling the weight settle over her shoulders. It had been so long. Her hands moved through the motions, automatically checking straps, adjusting the fit, making sure her medical kit was accessible. She caught her reflection in a darkened window. A middle-aged woman with gray-threaded hair and a limp. Someone who looked like she should be home in bed, not gearing up for a firefight. But underneath the years and scars and pain, she could see something else. Something that had never quite died. The warrior. The guardian. The woman who'd walked through hell carrying wounded brothers on her back. She was still there. And tonight she was going to remind General Thornton's men exactly who they were dealing with. Maggie moved to the window, watching the darkness beyond. Somewhere out there, armed men were approaching, confident in their numbers and their weapons. They had no idea they were walking into a hospital defended by some of the most dangerous people in the world. Come on, Maggie whispered to the darkness. Let's see how brave you are when the prey fights back. Behind her, Riker was positioning his men. Emily and Jonathan were being moved to the most secure room, and in the underground garage, footsteps echoed as armed men began their approach. The angel of Fallujah was awake, and she was done running. Maggie moved through the third-floor corridor, her rifle raised, scanning corners with practiced precision. Franklin Mackenzie appeared beside her, 68 years old, but moving like a man half his age. At 68, his eyes were sharp, his movements fluid. He'd been an Air Force pararescue jumper, and nothing about retirement had dulled his edge. South fire escape, Riker's voice crackled in her earpiece. That's your position. Franklin's with you. They reached the window that opened onto the rusted metal structure. 3 stories up, with clear sight lines to the parking lot and street approaches. Maggie settled into position, her rifle resting on the windowsill. Franklin positioned himself slightly behind his scoped precision weapon, ready. 12 years, Franklin said quietly. Since Fallujah, since Thornton left us. You know it's him. Riker told me. Makes sense. Thornton always chose his career over his people. Franklin's voice hardened. 3 operators died because he wouldn't authorize support. You lost your leg, and he got promoted. Below, 3 SUVs crept through the parking lot, running dark. They stopped in tactical positions. Doors opened. 12 men emerged, moving with military precision. Body armor, helmets, suppressed weapons. Professional, Franklin muttered. Maggie's radio crackled. Riker's voice. All units, contact imminent. Defensive engagement only. They fire first, we respond with prejudice. The assault team moved toward the building. 2 men flanked the entrance. A third readied a breaching charge. The explosion lit up the night. The door blew inward. The team flooded through and ran straight into Edwards and Morrison. Gunfire erupted. The sharp crack of rifles in enclosed spaces. Shouts. Chaos. West stairwell breach, Walsh reported. 3 hostiles engaging. Franklin spoke calmly. Two breaking off, heading for the fire escape. Maggie tracked them through her optics. Two figures in tactical gear using cover working their way south. She settled her red dot on the lead figure. Center mass, smooth exhale, trigger press. The rifle bucked. The man dropped. His partner dove behind a dumpster, returning wildfire. Bullets sparked off the fire escape. Franklin's rifle spoke once. Clean shot. The second man fell. Two down southeast corner, Franklin reported. The battle raged for 3 brutal minutes. Maggie fired twice more, both shots finding targets. Then silence. Sit rep, Riker demanded. Edwards, main stairwell secure, 4 down, 2 wounded. Walsh, west clear, 2 down, 1 retreated. Franklin, south perimeter secure, 3 down, no casualties. Morrison, 1 vehicle departed, 3, maybe 4 occupants, heading north fast. Thornton's men were retreating. We relocate now, Riker ordered. Police inbound, 3 minutes. Grab the wounded hostiles. Move. They extracted quickly. Emily was transferred to a stretcher, Maggie checking her vitals. The girl was awake, eyes wide with terror but not screaming. Remarkably composed for a 7-year-old who'd just heard a firefight. When Emily saw Maggie, relief flooded her face. The convoy assembled. 3 SUVs, engines running. Maggie rode with Riker, Emily, and Jonathan. They pulled out as sirens wailed in the distance. 20 minutes of counter-surveillance driving brought them to an industrial park. Riker directed them to a building marked Blackwood Security Consulting. Marcus owns this, Riker explained as the garage door closed behind them. Legitimate business, but the back section belongs to us. Inside was a revelation. Computer stations, communications gear, a full medical bay, and standing in the center, 3 men Maggie hadn't seen in 12 years. Marcus Blackwood, a 67, gray-haired but radiating command presence. A Marine to his core, leaning on a cane from the hip injury Fallujah had given him. William Sterling, 62, and Lean, the quiet ranger who'd always preferred actions to words. Thomas Donnelly, 70, in a wheelchair, but still dangerous. The spine wound hadn't diminished him. It had forged him harder. The angel returns, Marcus said, his voice a deep rumble. Thought you'd gone soft, Callahan. Must have tried, Maggie said. Didn't take. Never does, William added. They moved Emily to the medical bay where Raymond Cavanaugh waited. At 65, the former Army medic still had the gentle hands that made patients trust him. Cricothyrotomy clean placement, Raymond said, examining Emily. Your work. Hospital corridor. Less than ideal circumstances. Medicine happens wherever the patient is dying. Raymond continued his assessment. Vitals stable, trach site clean, excellent work. And while Raymond worked, the last guard assembled in operations. Riker spread tactical maps across the table. Thornton knows we're operational, Riker said. Knows his men failed. He's got 6 days before Fitzgerald testifies. That's 6 days to eliminate witnesses or destroy their credibility. So he'll escalate, Marcus said. They prepared through the night. Maggie and Raymond organized the medical bay. Franklin and William established defensive perimeters, cameras, motion sensors. Thomas coordinated encrypted communications. Marcus and Riker fortified every vulnerability. By dawn, they were ready. Maggie found Emily awake. The girl reached for her whiteboard. You stayed. I promised I would, Maggie said. What's going to happen? Bad men will try again, but we're ready. You're protected by the most dangerous guardians in the world. The last guard. You heard that? I heard everything. They're your family. They're my brothers. People I fought beside. Emily wrote, when my mom died, she told me an angel would come. I think she meant you. Maggie couldn't speak. The words hit too deep. Emily continued, my mom would like you. I would have liked your mom too. Emily smiled, then her eyes closed. For 5 days they waited. 5 days of rotating watches, constant vigilance. Thornton's men probed their defenses, twice more testing for weaknesses. Each time the last guard repelled them. But the real assault was coming. On the 6th morning, with testimony scheduled for that afternoon, the alarm screamed. Multiple contacts, Riker's voice cut through the radio. 20 to 25 hostiles. Full assault. This is it. Maggie looked at Emily. I have to go. Raymond stays with you. Emily grabbed her hand, terrified. I'll come back, Maggie promised. I always come back. She grabbed her rifle and moved to position. Through the window, she counted them. Not 12 this time, 25. 3 coordinated teams. This was an execution. The assault began with precision. One team breached the front with explosives. Another cut through the west wall with torches. A third rappelled from the roof. The last guard met them with everything they had. Maggie fired controlled bursts, her rifle barking steadily. Franklin's precision shots dropped targets methodically. Marcus directed fire with shouted commands. William ghosted between positions. Thomas coordinated from his wheelchair, but there were too many. West wall failing, Edwards shouted. Fall back to medical bay, Riker ordered. Make our stand there, they consolidated. 8 defenders, Emily and Jonathan in the corner, 20 assault team members still fighting. The math was brutal. Then the door exploded inward, but it wasn't another assault team. It was General Richard Thornton himself. At 65, he still carried command presence. Tailored suit under body armor. Silver hair, cold eyes. He held a pistol with practiced ease. Callahan, he said, voice cultured and calm. The nurse who wouldn't die. Thornton. Maggie raised her rifle. This ends now. Does it? I have 20 men outside. You have 7 tired operators and a crippled woman. His smile was ice. You should have stayed invisible. You left us to die in Fallujah, Maggie said quietly. To cover your fraud, 3 people died because you chose money over honor. I chose survival. I chose power. And I built an empire while you played nurse. He gestured at her leg. How's that working out? Better than prison will work for you. I'm not going to prison. I'm walking out. And you're all dying. He raised his pistol toward Emily, starting with the girl. Maggie moved without thought. She threw herself sideways, her body between Thornton's gun and Emily. The shot rang out. Pain exploded in her shoulder. She hit the ground, hard rifle clattering away. Franklin's shot came instantly. It caught Thornton in the chest, punching through armor, dropping him. Riker was on Thornton in seconds, zip-tying his hands. Raymond was at Maggie's side. Through and through, missed bone. You'll live. Outside, the sounds changed. Police sirens, federal agents. Riker spoke into his radio. All hostile forces, this is Captain James Riker, United States Navy. You're surrounded by federal law enforcement. Your employer is in custody. Surrender your weapons. This is over. One by one, the assault team surrendered. Maggie sat against the wall, Raymond binding her shoulder, and watched FBI agents swarm the facility. Watched them read Thornton his rights. Watched them lead him away in handcuffs. It was over. 6 weeks later, Maggie stood outside the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. Inside, Jonathan Fitzgerald had just finished 3 hours of testimony. The evidence was overwhelming. General Richard Thornton was going to prison for life. Emily stood beside Maggie, no longer needing the tracheostomy. Her voice was raspy but strong. Did they get him? They got him, Maggie confirmed. It's over. Jonathan emerged exhausted but relieved. 47 people indicted, including 3 senators. The prosecutor called it the biggest defense fraud case in history. What now? Emily asked. Now we go home. Now we heal. Now we figure out normal. 3 months later, Maggie walked into Mercy General Hospital, not as a supply clerk, as director of the new combat medicine training program. The conference room was full, 30 students, young doctors, nurses, paramedics. Beside her stood Raymond, Marcus Franklin, and William. Welcome, Maggie began. This program teaches what books can't. How to make life or death decisions in seconds. How to function when everything's wrong. How to be someone's angel when they need one. A young resident raised her hand. Ma'am, is it true you're a Navy Cross recipient? Yes. Is it true you saved 6 people while wounded in combat? Maggie paused. I did what needed doing, like you'll learn to do. After class, Emily and Jonathan were waiting. Surprise, Emily grinned. We came to see your first day. You should be in school. Dad said this was more important. Maggie showed them the facility, training rooms, simulation equipment, medical base. This is amazing, Jonathan said. You're going to save so many lives. That's the idea. Emily tugged Maggie's sleeve. Can I tell you something? Always. I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. Like you. I'm going to help people. Maggie knelt to Emily's level. You'll be a better doctor than I ever was. No, Emily said seriously. I'll be different, but I learned from the best. That evening, the last guard gathered at the VA hospital. Marcus, William, Thomas, Raymond, Franklin, Riker, and Maggie. 7 people who'd survived when they weren't supposed to. To the ones who didn't make it, Marcus said, raising his glass. To the ones who did, William added. They drank in silence. Heard your program's getting applications nationwide, Thomas said. The Angels teaching a new generation. We all are, Maggie corrected. This isn't mine. It's ours. What we learned bought with blood passed on, so others don't learn it the hard way. Think it'll make a difference, Franklin asked. It already has. Emily's alive. Fitzgerald testified. 47 corrupt officials are in prison. The system worked because we made it work. Maggie looked at her brothers, and we'll keep making it work, for as long as we're needed. Which is forever, Riker said with a slight smile. They sat together as the sun set, 7 warriors gray-haired and scarred but still standing, still fighting, still protecting. The Angel of Fallujah had found her purpose again. And this time she wasn't fighting alone.